turn around and do some outer now. Cool.
So, Seamilk, where are we headed today?
Well, we are headed to the wonderful White Egret Lake. I've never been there myself, but I've heard from my friend that there are some fantastic twisty roads there.
Okay, nice. It's about time we got some nice roads. We're always kind of in these urban sprawl areas, aren't we?
You betcha.
Right, so our topic today, guys, is Northern China versus Southern China. And the reason is we've just gotten back from Beijing, which is pretty much in Northern China, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Right, so here we are. Great, what's a White Egret Resort?
Egret Lake Resort Agile. What the hell is that?
No idea. Anyway, let's start with the basics. Northern China and Southern China, they're so far apart, there are lots of differences, but let's just start with the weather. And how about you tell us what's good about the weather in the north?
Yeah, I lived there for a couple years actually. I lived in Inner Mongolia province, and the climate was very similar to what you'd get in northern America. It's you know, not a ton of rain, it's not super wet or anything, and the summers are just fan-frickin-tastic. They're just, it's beautiful, crisp, cool jacket weather at night, and during the day you get a little bit of heat, enough to warrant and a nice cool ice cream or a nice beer. Right. But it's never overwhelmingly cold or hot. It's just fantastic, and it's just the polar opposite of you know, the weather down here.
Right, well, I mean, you're talking about the good stuff, which is summer. But the thing about the north is, although it has sometimes spectacular weather during the summer, if you're anywhere near a big city, like say Beijing or Shanghai or any of those, during the winter it is the worst possible environment for a human being to be in. Okay?
Why do you say that?
Well, okay, first of all, you get snow, right? Which, that's all good and well. Snow's nice, especially for people who are used to it.
Right.
But the pollution is off the charts. And the reason is they use coal burning stations for heat, to generate heat for all the buildings. They pipe it through the radiators and stuff. So you've got all this pollution from the coal burning facilities, you've got all the factories, especially near Beijing, you've got the Gobi Desert and all that dust in the air.
Sure.
And during winter, there is no summer breeze to blow all this stuff away, right? So you get this thick, disgusting smog that pretty much gets into the slush, and you've got this, basically this apocalyptic sort of thing going on there.
Wow.
Now, we just got back from Beijing, and we experienced like some of the best weather when we were there, right? Well, when you were there.
It's
it was
gorgeous,
amazing.
Man. Gorgeous.
It was so good. But remember, I arrived a couple days before you, right?
Yeah.
And the day I arrived, when I got off the plane, it was disgusting. There was like a thick, I don't know how to explain it, there was just a thick dust in the air, right? And my eyes started stinging as soon as I got off the plane. My throat closed up, my nose filled with mucus. It was really just awful. You know, then it rained, and then the day you came after it rained, it had cleared up, and then it was all nice. So
I got lucky.
Basically, in the north, it's a real sort of toss-up. You're either going to get really good weather or like absolutely disgusting, awful weather. Yeah.
And it really depends, though. I mean, if you're in a countryside area, you're not going to run into pollution, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so tell me what's good about the south. This is where we live, right? We live in the south.
Okay. Well, first thing that's good about the south is, well, you can see it's a lovely blue day. You know, blue sky, I should say. What am I saying? Blue day. Okay, the nice thing about the south is it never really gets very cold.
Right. Okay,
so if you don't like cold weather, this is the place for you. You basically will have warm weather all around. Even in the middle of winter, you can still go outside in the middle of the night and have sort of street barbecue. As long as you're wearing a jacket and a scarf, you'll be okay.
Sure.
So for people who like warmer climes. And yeah, because it's very tropical down here, you know, we're kind of on the Tropic of Cancer, aren't we, down here?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's tropical, you get lots of lush foliage, and you know, the wildlife is awesome, and that kind of thing. So you get a kind of a jungle vibe, and it's actually really nice. But you know, let's talk about the bad stuff. You go for the bad stuff in the southern weather.
The bad stuff, guys, I'm not gonna lie to you, it really affects me. I am from the north, like I said, I'm from New York, and the heat here is unbearable. I'm talking 40 degrees, I'm talking over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm talking monsoon rains that kind of cool down the day for 10 minutes and then it goes back up to those ridiculous blistering hot temperatures. It's almost unbearable for about 5 months out of the year, at least for me. I never grew up in a hot climate, so this sticky 100% humidity jungle climate is enough to make me resent the summers here in southern China.
Yeah, dude, you're not the only one. Yeah, you could be wearing a pair of glasses, and if you go outside from your air-conditioned house, they just mist up. And camera gear, you pull out your camera, your lens mists up. So yeah,
sure,
you got to be aware of that.
Horrible.
It's really pretty out here, man.
It's gorgeous out here. This is really nice. It kind of shows this is what southern China kind of looks like. You know, it's very lush, very green.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the next thing, which is food.
Yay.
And I'll start talking about northern food, then you can talk about southern food. How about
Sure.
that? Okay. First thing about northern food is that I'd say it's incredibly foreigner friendly. In other words, it's more the kind of food that most foreigners are used to. And the reason for this is they tend to eat a lot of bread up in the north. And noodles, they like noodles, and a lot of meat. It's all about sort of meat, hearty potatoes, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Which is kind of different to down here in the south. I know we're generalizing here. Every province has its own special kind of food, and there's so many weird and wonderful dishes you can find in China. But up north, it's really just, hey, can we go in here?
We could probably sneak up.
Nah, it's just residential. Let's turn around.
Probably nothing up there,
Yep.
to be honest.
Yeah, so northern food is actually very agreeable to most Westerners, I'd say.
Okay.
You know, minus those Mao done and pea done eggs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, how about southern food? How would you describe southern food?
I would describe southern food as weird. When you're talking about like a shock to the system, you said northern food was foreigner friendly. I would say the exact opposite of the province that we live in. Cantonese food typically includes organ meat, a lot of strange animals that you might not consider eating.
Yeah.
You know, dog meat, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, on our trip, we ended up eating cat and snake and stuff. So all the exotic, weird stuff is here down south. But the average diet, I would say, is very qingdan, they say, very bland. And they eat a lot of soups for medicinal value. And food has that kind of medicinal value as well. It's not like eat to get full, it's like eat to kind of balance your qi or something, you know, in Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, all this kind of stuff. So
Sure.
Of course, that's a generalization. You get outside of Guangdong province, you go to Sichuan, Hunan, and all these places, everything is super, super, super spicy. Use a lot of chilies and stuff. But that's how I would describe the food down here. Is very strange, actually, and very diverse.
Yeah, don't forget their main starch is rice down here, so...
That's also a good point.
Yeah. So you got a lot of rice down here in the south and more noodles and stuff up in dumplings and so on in the north.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, like, it doesn't matter where you are in China, you can find food from the north or the south, but just in general.
True.
So that's pretty much food. I mean, we could go on forever about food. It's a huge topic, but let's move on to people.
Yeah.
So maybe you lived in the north longer than me, so maybe you can describe northern people.
Gonna say northern people are more direct, more jovial, easier to make friends with, maybe a little bit more forward thinking, a little bit more open to foreign ideas. I would say a lot less traditional than southern people, and I found it really easy up north to make friends with Chinese guys. And I would say part of the reason is actually because of the drinking culture. A lot of people like to drink beer, baijiu, all that kind of stuff, and the heavy drinking culture up there means that people are kind of loosened up, hanging out outside at night in the summer, drinking some beers and stuff, approach you, share a drink with you, you know. It's kind of a nice little vibe. But I'm gonna say a lot more nationalistic. There's a lot more national pride up there, and I definitely see people that are proud, actually proud to be Chinese, right? And what about southern people?
Well, I mean, you still got that whole friendly drinking thing going on down south for sure, but I'd say that Chinese people in the south, you can sum it up very easily with two words. The first word is money, the second word is family.
Gotcha.
And that's pretty much all that matters to southern people. That's a huge generalization, but I think...
No, you're spot on.
Yeah,
dude.
I think that's just the best way to describe it. So you can never really become incredibly close to the people down here. Sure, I mean, I've got lots of friends and acquaintances, but you know, if you're not part of their family, you'll always be at a distance.
Sure.
And well, I've got a Chinese fiance. Tomorrow she's going to actually be my wife. We're getting married
Congratulations.
tomorrow. Thanks. And you've got a Chinese wife down here in the south. You know what it's like. You're part of the family, then you get kind of taken into the whole thing. But before that happens, you're just an outsider.
You're nobody.
Yeah. So yeah, money and family, that's pretty much what people are like down in the south. I'm also just going to point out there are differences, like the people down south. How about you want to go forward or do a U-turn?
Whatever.
Okay, forward. People down south are a lot shorter than the people in the north,
Yes.
genetically. And also the alcohol tolerance is way worse down here. People get that Asian flush, you know, they get red when they drink.
You're correct.
Yeah, let's do a U-turn. I think that'll just lead, this will lead us out.
Good luck.
Okay. Yeah, it says there that's like the exit or whatever. Yeah, so that's the people. Now let's let's get on to language, and I've got a real bone to pick when it comes to language, so I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna let you start. Let's talk about what language is down in the south. You go ahead.
Language in the south, well, what you're going to find is that the national language of China is called Putonghua, which is Chinese, right? We know it as Mandarin in the West. And it's spoken everywhere in China. And actually something that you've brought up a lot of times in your videos is the assumption that you won't be able to speak Mandarin Chinese in other areas that have local dialects. And that's not true. Both you and I have been around the entire country, and we've never had a problem being understood in Chinese.
Sometimes it takes a little bit of, you know, guesswork, but the people even in the small rural villages can usually understand basic Mandarin.
Sure. My point is, there is dialects. There are dialects in these local areas, and they're much more different from Mandarin down here in the south. They can be related to Cantonese and Hakka and all kinds of different languages, right? So the difference is that will you be surrounded by different languages down here? When I came to Huizhou for my first year in China, I never heard Mandarin on the streets at all because everyone was local. They spoke either Huizhou dialect or Hakka, and I didn't want to learn those languages. So for me, it wasn't a hindrance to be understood, but it was a hindrance to my exposure to the language.
Whole immersion. Hey, let's turn left over here.
So a lot of different dialects up here. But speaking of dialects, there are some up north as well. Why don't you tell us about that?
Okay. Here's the thing. I was lucky when I came to China because I ended up in Shenzhen first. Yeah. Shenzhen is a migrant city, so you've got people from all over China, all the different provinces in one city. So they have to have a neutral sort of language to speak, which is of course Mandarin or Putonghua, which means common language. And they all kind of developed this neutral accent and neutral dialect, and you can understand everyone in Shenzhen, right? And then when I went to Taiwan, it's the same thing. They speak the same kind of dialect. And
sure.
It's really good. Like, I can understand everyone. In fact, in Taiwan, it was the clearest. I could understand everyone very clearly.
Agreed.
Then recently, we went to Beijing, right? And that just sparked off these memories. When I studied Chinese in the Shenzhen University, they make you learn from the textbooks the sort of Beijing dialect, this Erhua, which is only there because Beijing is the capital and they're kind of like, well, our dialect's going to be the national official one. But it's really a very, I would say, unclear dialect. Like, let me give you an example. When we were up in Beijing, you remember in Chinese you will say wei shima, means like why. And I heard a guy in the street go like wurma. They take wei shi, make it wei shima, but they're wurma.
Yeah.
And like instead of saying ar shi kwai, it's like, I mean wu shi kwai, it's like wur kwai, you know, and they can't even explain it. I was asking them, why do you say guanmer instead of guanmen?
Right,
but
close the door.
You say Tiananmen, then you don't say Tiananmen. They just couldn't explain it, so it's a bit up in the air and it's a bit strange. It's a little bit, sounds a bit lazy to me. It's like, maybe you can give an example in English, like,
I would say, like, if you went down south to Louisiana or something, or Alabama, and someone's like, why don't you get around these parts and mosey on up to the corral, you know what I mean? Like, there's different words used, but it's like the way that people kind of lazily speak.
Correct.
Would be an example.
So it's kind of interesting because the only parts that people speak that very strong Erhua is in Beijing and around that area.
Yeah.
So if anywhere like in central, southern, eastern, western China,
even most northern.
Yeah, even the most northern, like Harbin and stuff, they don't use that.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
So occasionally I'll bump into a foreigner who's been studying in a university or been studying in Beijing, because there's tons of foreigners there, and they'll have this Erhua, and they'll be like, "What's I home here?" and blah blah blah, and I'll be like, "Ah, man,
And they're under the impression they speak standard Mandarin. What are we doing?
Everybody knows that's like kind of a Beijing thing, so yeah. Well,
for sure. And if anyone wonders, me and Winston both speak standard Mandarin.
we can understand the Beijing Hua, it's just...
It was kind of difficult sometimes,
and it is a little comical for me anyway. Anyway, cool. So that's my little bone to pick. It's off my chest. I'm not
Sure.
a big fan of the way it sounds, and I don't like the fact that it's been made the standard Mandarin, but it's actually like a dialect that's only really in the northern part of China.
Totally agree.
You know what I mean? Okay, cool. So is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in the middle of nowhere now. Maybe.
Yeah, now we're gonna have to find our way out.
Do you have anything you'd like to say to the people back home?
North, south, east, west, no matter where you're from, I'm gonna thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And if you haven't done so, please do.
And if you don't like, comment, or subscribe, like the weather today, stay awesome.